Hey, what's good, guys? It's your I'm not gonna say it's your boy. It's Stuff Graphics here, and before I start, I do want to say, if you don't follow me already on Instagram, if you're new to the channel, you should definitely go follow. I post some fire content like close to every week. I try to do multiple times a week. Anyway, I just want to say that, and then I'm gonna get right into it. Today what I'm going to be doing is a little different. I'm going to do a tutorial on how to do the Broncos style of edits, like designs. How to like make professional designs, but like maintain, but like, also learn how to make them at the same time. So I'm really excited. I spent a lot of time working on this. I actually already recorded this video, but I forgot to plug in my mic, so I don't have that, which kind of sucks. So I have a video, but on the bright side, I'm experienced. So anyway, I have some fonts here. I have some pictures. Honestly, it's a total coincidence that I did. Goodness, I totally blanked. Todd Davis. Todd Davis is actually one of my favorite players on the Broncos. I think he's the most underrated player. So I'm gonna do him anyway. And I'm going to teach you guys how to do this. I'm really excited, and I think you're going to enjoy it. I think it's going to help you. And yeah, so let's get right into it. I'm also going to post all the effects I use in the link or in the description. Let's get into this. Alright, so the font that I used two actually. I used this one, which is Agane. I think that's how you pronounce it. I used this one, which is like, it's Bourbon. Goodness, it's not letting you select anything else. Anyway, it's like Bourbon something. I'll put it in the description. Anyway, so I'm gonna use the same player because I don't really feel like cutting it out again, and plus I already have it all set out. So I'm gonna set this up with 2000 by 2000. It's a reasonable size for an Instagram post. It maintains the square with high quality. It's my favorite when I'm making just an Instagram. So I'm gonna drag this in. This is him. Now what I did here is, Todd Davis should be relatively small compared to the photo. What I did do is set the white. I'm actually gonna put in the blue background first because I'm actually gonna use the blue that I used before because it took me so long to find this blue, and I think it'll save me a lot of quality time that I can spend with you guys. Anyway, so we have our photo right here anyway, and it's high quality. I got it off NFLphotos.com. Don't report me. We got this. That looks about good size. Now what I did is I made it more high quality. I duplicated the layer and I put it into Topaz Labs. If you're not familiar with Topaz Labs, it's a great plugin for Photoshop, and I really recommend it if you plan on using it. So then so I did that. Oh goodness. So I'm gonna make this larger now because last time. Alright, so it looks like so this is what it was before. Subtle changes, but big thing you need to know when you design is that these subtle changes make a big difference in the end. Then what I did is I turned the contrast down just a little bit, down a lot actually, because the white, what it does is later in the design when you add more like lighting layers, it'll start to pop out a lot more than you want it to. And so I did that. Now the first thing that I want to do when I start this, so I want to add a just a shadow under him. So I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I am going to make a solid color, and that solid color is going to be black. So I'm going to make this black. We're going to clip these two, and then we're going to merge them together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control T, grab it from the top, and I'm going to move it down. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to move this down to about 16, 17. Whatever you want. I did 16 last time, but I think 10 looks a little better. I'll do, how about 13? 13 looks good. And I'm gonna adjust the fill layer, make it a little smaller. Alright, that looks good. So we have our shadow. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our background image. As you can see, here we have like the kind of him in the background. This took me a while to figure out, surprisingly. I thought it'd be a lot easier than it actually was. What I ended up doing is I found an image on the internet, and I used it. It's of Todd Davis. And I'm going to drag it over here. this is the original image. I also put some topaz on here, and then what I did is I did this trick with some more HDR. Then I made it black and white, and I put it on overlay, and put some levels on it to make it lighter, to make it blend more. And I put on overlay down to about 57%, 50%, depending on the image that you're working with. The opacity is clearly going to be a little bit different. Then I used a gradient fill layer to make it. I put a mask on, and then with that gradient I made it fade a little bit so it's not a harsh line. You can see it in here as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the lighting a little bit because we want it to focus a little more on him. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go to here, just like half moon cookie thing, go to gradient. I have a black preset already. Go black, black, and then make sure it's transparent at the end. We're gonna go style, go to radial, and then we're gonna flip it to reverse. I'm gonna change the angle a little bit so it incorporates a little more of his body. Focus it on him. I'm gonna change it about 200, between 200 300, depending on what image you're working with. I like that. It looks good. We have a focus here. This before, after. You know, it's really helpful. And as we put more CC on and texture later in the video, this is going to make a very big difference. Now I'm going to do is I'm going to add a black and white gradient map. Then I'm going to put this on overlay. It's just going to bring out the black a little bit more and make the image pop more. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a white. I have a light gray layer with a white layer. Put that also on overlay, which is going to make the whites pop a little more. I'm going to put this around 50%, depending on what image you're working with. Again, how bright you want it, that's up to you. This is what's great about graphic design, is it's all up to you. My shadow, there you go. So, there we go. We have the beginnings of our design already all set up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a color lookup layer. And this is going to make the blue change a little bit. So color lookups, sometimes on a CC, they really help your image because I like them. I use them on every single one. Since I'm a Broncos editor, I always use Sienna Blue because Broncos colors are orange and blue. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose selective color, make the orange pop a little more. If you zoom in, that orange is very dim, and the Broncos' main color is orange, so I want to make that pop more. Bring up the magenta and the yellow to make, like, this is before, this is after. Subtle differences, but I'm telling you, they really matter. And the cayenne, it's also, the blue is not the Broncos blue. It's very green, you can see. So I'm going to turn the magenta up, the yellow down a little bit. That looks good, actually. These are some good colors. I like what I'm working with. Yeah, so subtle differences, but it brings, I want to say, harsh tones down. That's the word I want to use. Alright, so we already have the basic foundation for this. Now what you can see in the background here is we have like this line, these black lines that add texture. Every graphic designer should add a little texture depending what you're working with. It brings the photo out more. I got this photo online by just Googling line textures, and then I just copied and pasted it. This I'm going to bring, so I have it in here. I brought the size up. I don't like how thick these lines are. So I'm going to do it like that. That looks pretty good to me, honestly. Then I'll bring the opacity down to around 30% or so. So we still want to see the line, but we don't want to see too much of the line. You feel? Alright, then I'm going to bring it down here. So I'm going to put it above him. I think it looks good that way. Now also, as I said, subtle differences. What we have up here is we have like this little white ray. And this took me a while to figure out, surprisingly. I'm kind of disappointed with how long it took me to figure out, honestly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer above him. And I'm going to grab the gradient layer. I already have white selected. And I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Put that on overlay. Then I'm going to drag it down just a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my eraser, and I'm going to make this a little bigger. Make sure your hardness is on 0, so you don't have any harsh lines. And I'm going to just close this in on here, so it's just focused around his head. So look, this is before, this is after. It focuses the lighting up there a little more. I can drop the opacity if I feel, but I think that looks pretty good to me. Alright, moving on. So we have our gray texture. We're going to move on to our text soon. Honestly, what I really like about this is how, like, you'll notice in a lot of the Broncos designs that the guy in the back has a lot of HDR. And I'm wondering if I should add more of that. But the photo that I'm working with is just so dark that it doesn't really work with HDR that well. So I'm just gonna try to add a little bit more dynamic pop. I think I'll do dynamic pop 2, most likely. I just want to make him pop, just come out of the photo a little more. I'll do heavy pop grunge. That's gonna work very well. I guess some parts came out well. Alright, so we got this, and I'm gonna move on to the text, I believe. Unless I'm forgetting anything. I don't think I am. Yeah. Alright, so yeah, so text. This is my least favorite part, and this is probably the hardest part about the edit. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, make my workspace a little easier to work with. We have our CC in our background. Okay, so this is where it gets a little difficult. This is where it's gonna vary a little bit. So I'm gonna bring on my text tool here. And the font that I said I'm going to use is Agane. Link is going to be in the description. Then we have game. Make sure it's all caps, game. And I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I also want to make sure it's centered. I'm pretty sure it's centered, but just make sure. So we have our center line. Let's drag this over a little bit. Alright, so we have our centered game. It's about the size. As you can see, the fonts are fairly different. Now I'm going to grab my FX. I'm going to go to stroke. I'm going to set my stroke color to white. 3 is actually a reasonably good size. I'm going to drag this down to 0, and our fill is down to 0, and we have a nice thing. This is not working out. Alright. Now I am going to select my background layer for my color. I'm going to remove the CC real quick. Let's see, we got a brush. Actually, we're going to grab our color. It looks really dark, honestly. Why is it so dark? Alright, so we got our tones. Alright, that's good. So then we're going to put our CC back on. Okay, so our game. And now what you see here is we have a little fade on the bottom. I couldn't figure out how to get this fade any other way, which is kind of pathetic. But, you know, that's okay. I'm going to shrink it. Okay, so we have our game. Now I'm going to do a new layer above this. And I'm going to do a slight touch up with my hardness 0 brush, bring my opacity down to around 11, 10, I'll do 15, 20, I'll do 20. I'm going to just lightly click around here, make the background fade out a little bit. And that looks pretty good. I'll lower the opacity just a little bit. Alright, so this is before, this is after. I just kind of made it fade just a little bit. I'm actually going to do a Control T here. So that now we have half of our, so I can fill in more like half. Alright, so that looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the day part. We have this day, but then we have some subtle layers in the middle. We have some shadow under his arm as his arm pops out a little bit. That's a pretty easy fix. We'll do that. Right, we have the lines. I don't have the lines. Okay, so now we have our text. I'm going to go back here. We're going to add the day. Make sure it's all caps again. Now I'm going to use my Bourbon font. This is Bourbon Grotesque. I will also put this in the description. And I'm going to drop this a little lower. Oh, I don't know why this is down here. Nice, now we have this up here. I'm gonna make this bold because I want it to pop out more. And this back to 100. Make this a little lower. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, then we're gonna reduce this in size. I don't know, too terribly much. This is not centered now that I realize it. We probably want this more like. I have to change the position of him, but it was going to be a quick fix. Alright, that looks good. Okay, so I'm gonna scoot this down. Up a little bit. See if this looks a little accurate. Yeah, it looks good. I'll make this actually just a little bit smaller. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask here. And I'm going to control click on this selection I have of Todd Davis. And then I'm going to go back to my my mask here, and I'm going to make sure my brush is black. And I'm just going to go over where the arm is covering. Make sure my opacity is back at 100%. And I'm just going to go over that. And that's a pretty easy fix, you know? So now we have, the text is still in front of him, but not his arm. It makes his arm. It's a cool effect. I like it. It looks like it's utilized by more graphic designers than me. Now I'm going to add that like little drop shadow type thing. We're going to go back to our, but we're going to slide our hardness back down to 0. Make sure our color is black. And we go up here, and we're going to like click above his arm so that you get the very edges down here. And we're going to click this here. And what you see is we only have the remainders, and slide the opacity down a little bit. So we have that shadow. Makes it look like his arm is actually above the line and coming above it. I guess I could have just added a drop shadow probably. What's the fun in that? Okay, so we have that. Now I'll add that line texture. I'm just going to use the same line texture I had earlier. I'm going to control drag this up and grab it here. I'm going to move the opacity back to 100, and I'm going to make it normal. Now I'm going to clip this on to the day, and that's a reasonable size already, honestly. Yeah, that looks good. And what I'm just going to do is I'm going to grab this, and I'm select it, and then I'm just going to delete it. I need to rasterize my layer first. I'll just press delete. That looks good. Where to grab it from? We want to make sure it's still large, so I like that. I just want to erase this. Alright, so look, that's pretty cool. We got our day texture. Now we're going to add this text up here and down here, and we'll add our logos. The game is on 6:15 Mountain Time. I'm not sure. It just says 6:15, and then TV it's on ESPN. So I'm gonna do that. We have the date. It's 6:15 MST. Drop this down here. TV-ESPN. So what it looks like is that my font grotesque does not have the colon in it, so I'm just going to go back to Bourbon. Whenever I'm working with a bulky font like this, I'll usually change my font to Impact because it just makes it bigger. But honest, yeah, that's good. Alright, now I'm going to make this orange. Let's go Broncos. Yeah, that looks good. Then we'll shrink this down. I don't think we need a bold anymore. Actually, we do need to. Yeah, let's make this impact actually. Oh, it is impact. This is actually smaller, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Maybe like that. Alright, so that looks pretty close to me. I'll shift this up just a little bit. Then I'm going to do is I'm going to add like this Broncos week but it's actually week 16 now, so I'm just gonna do that. Broncos week 16. We're on Agane for some reason, so I'm gonna change it back to bourbon. Change the color to orange. And I'll make this a little bit smaller, but I'm going to change the spacing in between it so that we have a lot of space in between our letters. I'll slide this up to wherever looks right, honestly. I'll make this a little bit smaller. 900. Let's make this smaller too. Why does that look so weird? Yeah, that looks good to me. I like that. Now what I'm gonna do is add the logos. So I already have the logos from my last design, so I'm just gonna throw those in. You can basically just look up Broncos logo, Raiders logo, and they'll come up for sure. So I'm just gonna pop these in here, slide them over, and make these a little bit smaller. Make sure they're above him and above the text. Now, if you weren't able to notice, I added a little bit of drop shadow to these ones. Also on here, they're farther away, but I decided I kind of wanted them closer to him. I'm gonna move this one over too. I have a little bit of drop shadow. It makes it pop just a little bit more. It's hard to tell, but I'm also gonna add some drop shadow to the text that I did earlier, wherever that went. It like disappeared. Oh, here we go. And then I'm gonna go back at FX, go down here to drop shadow, and make this size a little bit larger. Distance, change distance. That looks pretty good. Change the opacity down just a little bit. And there's subtle differences, like I said earlier, but they make a big change. Alright, so I like that. I actually really like how this has come out. I'm gonna make these smaller. Text. Then what I'm just gonna do is just add the symbol. We have like a little Broncos country thing down here. I could add that. Yeah, I might as well. Actually, this opacity thing is it's relatively low now that I realize it. So I'm gonna change the opacity of my background text. Just shift this down just a little bit. Alright, so then Broncos country. Hashtag Broncos, make sure it's all caps. And then I actually have the NFL Broncos font in here already. So I actually hate this font so much. It is so hard to work with. You literally can't work with it on any post. Like, I don't know why it's so long, but you can find it if you just look up Broncos font. I'm gonna make this smaller. You can just size this way. I'm gonna just size this way. And we got our basic Broncos country at the bottom. Nothing too fancy. I'll bold it just to make sure it's centered. I'm gonna Control T, drag this over to my middle. Do we need to bold? We really don't. Yeah, let's just do it like that. Alright, so we got our basic. I'm gonna clear the guides now, show you what it looks like without them. And this is our basic ending. We have I really like how this turned out. It looks very professional. It's a nice design. The Broncos Broncos designers do a great job. Talked to a couple people on the Broncos staff. They do a good job. It's a basic idea, but it's very professional. It's clean. I like it. It's a nice style. Let me know if you want me to do more of these videos, and yeah, I'll see you next time.